Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Star Trek Nitpickers. Today we're thrilled to be talking about a new story from the Orville. The Orville comic is back with Launch Day Part 1, and guys, it is awesome. I was so excited to be back on the bridge of the USS Orville. This one is from the same writer as the earlier comics, David A. Goodman, who's also a producer for the show. David Cabeza is back as the artist for this one, and that's awesome. The artwork really works well, and it's just really fun to look at. David Cabeza was kind enough to comment on our first video review of the first Orville comic book. Be sure to check that out. The earlier comics are also great. This is another Krill story. David A. Goodman is a fan of the Krill, it seems, and that would make sense. He was the guy who wrote the episode entitled Krill, where we meet the scaly cretins for the first time. Goodman also helped develop just who these religious reptilians are with Seth MacFarlane back before the actual writing for Season 1 had even started. Goodman's also worked on Family Guy and Futurama. He's also the president of the Writers Guild. So one of the cool things about this new story for this comic is that it shows us what's going on with Ed and crew after the last episode of Season 2. And that's huge to me because the last episode of Season 2 came out on April 25th, 2019. Yeah, a while ago. Almost a year and a half ago, guys. This episode actually starts with a blast from the past. Ed and Gordon are working on a Union science vessel called the Boar, a ship that seems like it might have been sort of a bore. Suddenly, the captain comes along with Isil, an officer who's about to be shuttled back to his homeworld of Alabar because a new government there has decided to leave the Union. So poor Isil can't continue to serve in the Union. This is a cool beginning because when you see Ed 20 years younger, you don't realize it's him, but Gordon looks more or less the same. Then on the next page, Ed gives his full name to Isil, and we realize who this kid is. It's also great how true to form this little scene is. Gordon's complaining about doing routine shuttle maintenance, and Ed is arguing that it's just as important as any other job that needs doing on the ship. So then we flash forward, and Ed's in the captain's seat of the Orville, asking Bortus to repeat just how many Krill ships he's picked up on the sensors. Bortus tells him it's 8 ships, and they're moving through Union territory. Kelly mentions that things were going so well, and Ed says, let's not assume they've thrown out the treaty negotiations just yet. This is great because it's picking up on one of the most important storylines from the end of Season 2, this peace treaty with the Krill. It turns out the Krill are not on their way to attack Earth, they're on their way to attack Alabar, the planet Isil went back to after it dropped out of the Union. The Krill say they've picked up signs of what might be an immensely powerful weapon. Ed convinces them to let him investigate, and then he convinces Admiral Ozawa to let him investigate. Isaac brings up information on Alabar, and we see that it was a nice place with democracy and technology equal to Earth's. Nobody has heard from them, though, since they left the Union. Meanwhile, the Krill decide they might need to blow up the Orville if Ed decides to stand in their way. After being surgically altered by Dr. Finn, Ed and Kelly go down to Alabar in a shuttle with Lamar and Gordon, who still look human. After dropping them off, Gordon and Lamar take the shuttle back up into space, but stay close. Next, we see an interesting conversation with Bortus and his family. Clyden is against the idea of intervening in the Krill situation here. Bortus points out that the Krill could end up wiping out Alabar for no real reason. There's still no proof the thing they're building is a weapon. Clyden doesn't care. Ed and Kelly get into the city and find the place has fallen apart a lot since the good old Union days. They're approached by a police officer of some sort who tells them visitors have to register at the registration office. They go to do just that, but Ed decides they should get lunch at a little restaurant. Lunch day! The woman who runs the restaurant gives them a lot of information about what's changed on the planet in the past 20 years. For one thing, she cooks the meal she brings them. Only the very rich still have food synthesizers, she says. She also tells them that tomorrow is launch day, and the launch should turn everything around and make life great on the planet again. Ed and Kelly are trying to figure out more about what exactly is going to be launched on launch day, but they end up running off and welching on their meal when she asks to be paid for it. It's kind of strange they don't realize Alabar is using money when the woman in the restaurant tells them only the rich have food synthesizers. But they're totally shocked when she mentions some people can't afford to eat at her restaurant. Ed repeats the word afford questioningly, and Kelly points out the obvious as if it's a startling idea. They still use money, even though this woman mentioned on the previous page that only the rich have food synthesizers. That was my only nitpick, though. Meanwhile, Gordon and Lamar are scanning the strange thing the people of Alabar have been building in space, and they find that the closer they get to it, the harder it is to pilot the shuttle. and the weapons guidance system would also be affected by all the interference if they wanted to use their weapons. Lamar points out that the Krill may be right about this thing being a weapon. So Ed and Kelly run off, and Ed mentions Alabar went over a century without using money. So what happened? Then they see this huge face appear on a screen, kind of like you'd see in Times Square or in the episode All the World is Birthday Cake when the leader of the Regorians addresses his populace. In this story, it's an Alabar leader who looks a lot like Ian McKellen to me. He's going on about how tomorrow is launch day and they've had their best engineers and scientists working on it for decades. Then he goes on to say the thing that was keeping Alabar from being a prosperous place before was the alien off-worlders who are still among them and wish to undermine their success and happiness. Ed and Kelly realize they might be able to find E. Sill, the officer Ed and Gordon served with on the Boar, if they go to the registration office and look him up. Gordon radios Ed and Kelly and tells them he and Lamar are approaching the giant thing that's being built in space. Ed asks him what it looks like. Gordon says, "Well, it's kind of hard to tell, but it kind of looks like a giant weapon." Then we finally get a good look at the thing, and yeah, not only does it look like it could be a giant weapon, it looks like one of the most famous giant space weapons of all time. The Death Star. I'm guessing it's some sort of planet crusher. And that's the end of part 1. So yeah, I can't wait for part 2, I'll tell you that. Knowing the Orville, I'd say there's a fair chance this thing will turn out to be something a little bit more unexpected than a planet crusher. But the next issue might focus more on Ed and Kelly convincing the people of Alabar not to use their planet crusher. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen? I really like the way this comic gives us a story that fits perfectly with the world of the show. This feels very much like it can and should be considered canon. The characters feel like the same people, not like some alternate version of them. I also really like the drawings for the rundown city on Alabar. It's fun to dive into something so otherworldly, and it's great to have a compelling story in that other world. It's also fun to see a young Ed and Gordon, even if only for a few moments. Please subscribe to our channel to help us stay in orbit. We're trying hard to reach 1.5 thousand subscribers by the end of the month. That's our challenge. Please help us by hitting the red subscribe button under the video here. It's free and easy, and it helps us out a lot. Thank you to everyone who's already subscribed. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching, and please drop a comment in the section below giving your opinion. Thanks so much, guys. Remember to go with Avis.